Hi, everybody. My name is Melanie Rogers, and I'm inviting you all to tune in to my show, Flip the Switch, How to Find the Light in Every Dark Shadow, every Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ClearSourceRadio.com and iHeartRadio. Hey everyone, you are now listening to Flip the Switch, How to Find the Light in Every Dark Shadow on the Clear Source Radio Network. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Hi guys, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. You're once again listening to Flip the Switch, How to Find the Light in Every Dark Shadow on Clear Source Radio, where people inspire people. Also heard on iHeartRadio and I believe Spotify. I want to welcome you back. My name is Melanie Rogers and I'm your host. Okay, so I hope you're having a great week. The weather's kind of crazy. I think we all know that. I think pretty much no matter where you are in the United States, I don't know, maybe across the whole world, weather's just kind of unpredictable. My heart goes out to those in Alabama who lost their lives and their homes and everything else to the tornadoes and such. So anyway, no matter what your weather is like and such in your area, hope you're making the best of it. Let me see. I'm trying to reflect back. Wasn't really thinking about this. I'm trying to reflect back to my week. And, well, this was my change in schedule at work. So when I have a change in schedule, sometimes we kind of come up short. So I actually worked night shifts, had one day off this week, and then turned around, flipped around, and worked a day shift. So in that, few hour time frame off, I just laid around and I streamed different things. I watched some TV and I took some naps. I do that often. And I think if you're an empathic person, you're a person who absorbs energy or you have those energy fluctuations. I've talked about it before. You might relate to me. You just basically have some sleepy days. I don't know how, better to label it. I'm going to have to come up with some clever little label so that it doesn't make me feel so like I'm wasting my time on my sleepy days. Those are those days where, for whatever reason, whether it's just I only have a few hours off, I'm low in energy, low in motivation, it's rainy outside, and it was rainy outside and cold, that it's just one of those days where I just want to lay down, take naps off and on throughout the day, get up, have some snacks in bed while watching TV. I know, waste of time. It is and it isn't. So, I look at that in two different ways as well. Anything that builds up your end, as long as it's not, a depressing thing. And I've done that before. So, just kind of lose my energy, lose my motivation and such because of too much stress going on in life, or just kind of wake up and, whether it's being heartbroken or disappointed or, in any different realm of life, where I just have those days where I just don't really feel motivated to get up and get moving. And you know what? I used to beat myself up. That's okay. Sometimes we need those days to just go by and be unconscious for as long as we can throughout the day. So I do that, and I look at it this way. I'm healing. When I have those days, especially if I'm low energy, I look at it as giving my body and my mind, my spirit, everything kind of a chance to catch up. So I had, one of those days this past week. And so anyway, for anybody else out there who has those kind of days, I think that that's just fine as long as there's balance. when it becomes a problem, and I've had this happen before, so I can speak from experience, it does become somewhat of a problem when you get too comfortable with that, and every day ends up being that way, because you just kind of lose a little bit of life and fall behind on maybe, and I'm speaking, like I said, from experience, fall behind on things that I need to do. Therefore, I start letting that guilt pile up, and then it's more of a stress because of laying around when I have so much to do. So anyway, like I said, life's about balance. I've been working on that big time. So occasionally, actually I've done this a lot lately, I will tell you that, the wanting to just lay around and kind of heal my body, reclaim my energy and all that. So I think that for me means a lot of energy around me, and some situations that kind of leave me going, okay, what's the next step in this process? So I no longer look at that as a completely negative thing, as long as I snap out of it, get the rest I need, let myself recharge and such. So the weather that's happening right now makes it really difficult to want to step out of that routine. Having a hard time stepping out of that routine. It's just because the weather it's very pleasant to kind of lay around in bed with your puppy dogs or your kitty cats, i.e. my puppy dog and my kitty cats, and stream TV, or if you're a big music listener, just listen to music or whatever and have those snacks and basically make it a sleepy day. So it's probably a good thing that springtime is coming, because that will probably snap me out of it, because spring comes and guess what happens? A lot of people have that drive to clean, to organize, and to prepare, even if it's just getting into physical shape, because we're preparing for bathing suit season. Yay, that's right around the corner. I have before I start really talking about tonight's show, I have good motivation this year, good incentive to get into really great shape, feel fantastic about myself in general. We always do, but it's always a good idea to be our best. But sometimes we need that extra motivation, kind of that excuse, that built-in excuse to really go forward with it. And sometimes I need that motivation to really kick it into gear. I have a couple of different things. One, it's going to be my 50th birthday coming up this next January. So I have all year to prepare for that. And of course, I want to hit it feeling amazing. So I have actually been working on that for many months now. Another thing is that a high school friend of mine planned her 50th party on a cruise. So she invited me. I'm one of those lucky people that she wanted to bring in her 50th year celebrating with. So how fun is that? And I was just talking to my coworker about this, and I thought, you know what? There's different people probably from my high school that's going to be there. And I look back and think, way back in high school when we're all young, we're all in our teens, looking around, I mean, it never would have crossed my mind that we were ever going to be 50, because, I had a deal with God, and I don't know what I did, but He's making me move along in life like everybody else. So I guess there's no way around it. I'm going to hit my 50th, but just to sit there and think, gosh, one of these days we're going to be 50 years old, and I can foresee us all on a cruise ship together celebrating. First of all, that seems like it'll never happen because it's so far in the future. Secondly, especially when they're not really the people that you hung out with. I'm friends with everyone who's planning on going. I love them all. Some of them, I've been more friends with than others. Some of them, they just, we were very nice to each other, but never really got to know each other. So I look back and I think about things like that. Like back in high school, did you ever think that you would end up bringing in your 50th birthday or anybody's 50th birthday with like this particular group of people? Didn't plan that, didn't picture that. So that just shows how life can change and also come full circle. Come back to your roots. We've talked about that, going back to your roots. And sometimes that ends up being the most important thing. So I'm excited about that. And like I said, it's going to get me in full gear, fully ready, because it's actually more toward the end of the year. But don't think I'm not going to try to pull it out and feel good in my bathing suit. And it also gives me a really great excuse to get a new bathing suit and get new cute Venus dresses, Venus.com. Yes, I'm advertising for them because I absolutely love that. Love that. Look at that website if you're a woman. Look up that website. You want to talk about the cutest. They have so many styles. It's overwhelming because they're constantly coming out with new styles. Very, very adorable outfits, dresses, everything else, and very well priced. And it's quality stuff. So I really love Venus.com. I've actually shopped off and on there since my 20s, my early 20s. I went with a long break in between, and the last couple of years I went back and I've gotten some things, and overall I've been very, very happy with what they offer. So that's just a little side note. So anyway, being, kind of going back into the whole Happy New Year thing, I'm always trying to remind people of how you feel at the beginning of the year. Part of that is those goals. The beginning of the year, we're all excited and motivated. So now I ask you, since I'm spilling as far as some of my goals and the reasons behind them, what I'm targeting, think to yourself, have you created any major goals this year? Any particular vacations or a birthday or any kind of celebration or a Tuesday, whatever, to where you're going to try to be your best, where it gives you that added motivation and inspiration to be your best. Now, a lot of people, me at some point probably, would have done probably would have done this as well and said, oh, you should always strive to be your best and your healthiest and all this. Well, yes and no. Give me a break. We are not all 100% motivated 100% of the time. And there's anybody who puts on that happy, smiley face and says, every single day I strive as hard as I can, physically, mentally, emotionally, everything else, without taking any kind of breaks. With that, I am continuing to work as hard as I can, giving it 100% every single day to be in my best shape, my best condition, my best health mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, everything else. I'm sorry, but I don't think it's possible. So, we go ebbs and flow, that whole ebb and flow thing, the whole roller coaster thing. We all go through that. That's just part of life. That's your physical energy levels, physical fitness levels. That's different foods you eat might make you tired, or this one gives you energy. It's life. Okay, you can go into a building and fill your lungs with toxins without even realizing it, whatever, and that could drag you down. So none of us 100% of the time are 100% toward being the best we can be. So going back, the original question here, are there any specific events, specific people? Yeah, sometimes we have someone in mind that we like, we're attracted to, or even if it's just in friendship, or even family members, or whatever the scenario is. They, for whatever reason, they bring out the I want to be my best version of myself when I see them. Okay, so no, there's that as well. People want to come out and say, and I did this as well, that you should never want to be your best for some guy or some girl. Well, you know what? Sometimes that is added motivation, and I look at that as a positive. I am very 100% bound and determined to be my 100% for myself, first and foremost. That means having high self-esteem, feeling confident in myself, because then any scenario can come up and you're ready for it. But at the same time, I actually enjoy when there's somebody in my head. A lot of times it'll be a guy. Sometimes maybe friendship, like, okay, I want to be, okay, this cruise, I'm going to be around my friends from high school. We're all striving, I imagine, we're all striving to feel fantastic and really hit our 50th year, in this cruise, probably wanting to feel fantastic and be fantastic. So my point is that any kind of motivation, any reason you have to be inspired to be your best, utilize it and don't feel guilty about it. Okay. I used to feel guilty when I would meet someone, a man, and next thing you know, I was working extra hard to be physically attractive or be in shape or bring on my best self. It wasn't always physical. Okay. A lot of it was I need to heal and get rid of stuff so that I don't screw this up, or so that, my personality's light, whatever. And I would go back, being me, the most independent woman you'll ever meet on the face of the earth, I would go back and I'd feel guilty about that. And I would think, who are you? All of a sudden, a guy comes into the picture, and now you have that big burst of energy to be your best. No, you know what? Sometimes we feel good about ourselves where we are, and then that little extra comes along, and it pushes you to want to be even better. Okay? I need those personally. I need those different situations because of my energy fluctuation. Okay? So that's mental energy, that's emotional energy, that's physical energy, all inclusive. Being an empathic person on top of it, that hits me hard. Okay? But I'm not going to say that that's just an empathic trait. That just means that all that kind of energy, emotions and such, everything will drain my energy. You can't be super 100% ready to kick it if you're drained of energy, emotional energy or otherwise, okay? And the roller coaster when it comes to emotions in general and situations that go up and down will actually create havoc and create ebbs and flows. Okay, so anyway, this isn't what I was going to talk about tonight, but hey, let's just flow with it, right? Okay, so anyway, maybe that's one of those little homework assignments I give you, is to sit here and think. It's already March. Think about, what the big plans were from the beginning of the year, the things that got you, the reasons that got you super motivated for the new year to be the best year ever, right? And think to yourself, has that died down? Do you still have specific events, or just that frame of mind that we had to really, this is my year, this is my year? So we're changing it a little from focusing on the remembering all the positive in the year, because that's what I talk about a lot when I say, Happy New Year, and remind yourself of the whole Happy New Year thing. Now I'm changing it a little bit to focus on those things that give us that extra boost of energy to make yourself the best you can be. That inspiration, because we have to have a lifetime of inspiration in order to keep progressing. Okay, some of that's just enlightenment in its own as we grow spiritually and such, mentally mature as we mature after we go through different experiences and such that causes us to mature, to look at things, flip the switch and look at things from a better perspective and all that. Those are all motivations. Those are all things that keep us inspired. Okay, so anyway, go with the ebb and the flow. I always think, like the roller coaster effect, let's call the ebbs and flows, or the hills and the valleys, whatever. When you're a little further down, like my day of sleep, wasn't super motivated or whatever, just let messages come to you. Just sit there and let whatever comes to you come to you. Think of the lessons behind anything that might be kind of holding you down or giving you a lack of motivation. Utilize every moment, even those moments where you just think, I really don't care today. Those are the lessons. Those are the times to pay attention to the lessons, and I always talk about that. And then when we're super motivated and we're going back up on that roller coaster, utilize the lessons and tackle that next goal, utilizing the lessons and using those as inspiration. Okay, so, all right, now, what I want to talk about tonight is, I entitled the show, An Eye for an Eye, but I use the word I. Not EYE, like your eyeball, but I, okay? An I, as in me, for an eye, well, which would be you, okay? Just think of it that way. An eye for an eye makes the world blind. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, I believe is the exact quote from Gandhi. Okay, what does that mean? I described the show tonight as different ways that we might think about reacting, I guess, to situations that are hurtful or angersome. Situations, if you feel like someone's doing something to you, whether consciously or unconsciously, purposely, or they just do things that don't resonate well with you, okay? Now, of course, something always happens that kind of puts me on a certain subject. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that this is exactly why I started thinking along these lines. And this is a really great thing in my world, that when I have situations happen that really bother me, that cause me to react possibly the way I would have reacted in the past, and I like growth, okay? So for me to react immediately the way I would have in the past to situations before I kind of flip that switch in my head that we talk about, what the show's about, I it gives me the opportunity to actually flip the switch. And this is the difference, is that now, even if I react initially in a way that I don't really want to react, I will automatically start analyzing it. I will think, okay, what's causing you to react this way? What are the best reactions? What is the best thing you can do to get a positive outcome? And that's a huge difference, okay? Now, okay, so what actually happened, and this is a small part of it, and this is the only reason I'm bringing it up, because I'm not going to complain about this. This is actually what got me on this thought process. So the thought process in itself is the most important part of what I'm going to tell you about. The circumstances that led me to that are just great in that they led me to the show, okay? They led me to really start analyzing these things, okay? And then over time, I practice these things. I think about it, I analyze it, I put it out as a show, but I really intake what I say because it's coming to me in the moment. And that's wisdom as well as growth and such. So that helps me to remind myself of my goals and how to respond to things in the future. But it also helps me analyze why we respond to things the way we do and all the different responses we could possibly have. Now, no, just like any other show that I do, that I'm not preaching to anybody. I may give examples where I personally don't believe that certain reactions might be the most beneficial, but everything is based on individuality and such, and, your own experiences and such. So these are just baselines that I'm thinking. So what does that mean? An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. I remember the first time I've heard the quote before, but I've never really thought about it. Okay. And a friend of mine was showing me her daughter's tattoo. This was a few years ago. And she was kind of, in this negative frame of mind about it because she was getting so many tattoos at a young age. And her concern was that she also wanted to join the military, and that was holding her back. It was, because they were visible. And that was part of the stipulation in the military, I believe. So anyway, the moral of that story is that she was showing me the different tattoos, and she kind of had an attitude like, oh, now she got this one. And she showed it to me, and it was a quote. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So even I was like, oh man, but I wasn't thinking about what the quote said. And she turned around and she said, well, actually, that's actually a really, deep quote. I don't have a problem with that. And that's the first time I really thought about that quote. And I was like, you're right. It is actually, if you're going to have something written out on you, if you're going to have a tattoo or whatever like that, is big because it took up a lot of space. Then, for it to be something profound and not something negative, not something that she's going to regret in the future. And that's the only thing I'm saying about it, as far as the size, all that, whatever. My point and her point was, at least it's something that's profound, and it is not something that is repulsive or offensive or anything like that she's going to regret in the future. Okay, so I started thinking about that, and it's an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. What does that mean? It means that when somebody does something to you, or somebody does something that affects you in a negative way, because like I said, not everybody does something specifically towards you, and I've learned that lesson. I've learned that lesson over and over in life, reacting to things where, and we talked about it on the show before, where they're not doing it toward me. I might be taking it personally. I might not like what's being done or what was said or whatever, but it wasn't against me personally. So I have to learn to change, and I have changed my reaction and how I intake that and allow people to be themselves and such. So what that means to me, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, is if somebody does something that affects you in a negative way, and your response is to turn around, basically revenge, okay? And that's kind of what revenge really is. Getting revenge on somebody, which is coming back and doing something to them that'll affect them in the same way, which is usually cause them anger, cause them pain, right? That's what revenge is. It's getting even, okay? So think about the quote. When you do something to get even with someone on a negative scale, then you're putting out as much negative energy as they're putting out, okay? An eye for an eye, if everybody just got even with everybody who did something toward them or did something that affected them in a negative way, and say it was an eye for an eye, say it was just picture that scenario, as it is. Poking someone's eye out. They poke your eye out. The whole world ends up blind. Is that really beneficial? It's saying that, and this is the one case where a double negative does not create a positive. Okay, you ever hear that? A double negative creates a positive. We're talking about mathematics. Wait, aren't we? No, we're talking about grammar. Like, ain't nobody done nothing wrong or something like that. That a double negative is supposed to create a positive, so you're not supposed to do that. But in this case, a double negative, somebody doing something toward one person, that person turning around doing something back, that is just doubling up the negativity, okay? There's nothing positive that comes out of that kind of stuff, okay? Now, the scenario. Well, I don't even know that the scenario was really a big deal. I'm just going to give some examples, I guess. Treating others, okay. Keep that quote in mind. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Now, I come up with another one, and it is, I've heard both of these quotes as well. We have all these wonderful quotes and memes that float around Facebook land, okay? And they're all profound, and I remember looking at each one of these quotes and relating to it, understanding it, and looking at it as a positive thing. But then, in this mindset I have going here, thinking about this whole scenario, I started really thinking about each individual quote and realized that they contradict each other. Like, these two quotes contradict each other. But I also realized that there's times when one quote over here might make sense. There's times when this quote over here makes sense, and it could lead to a positive thing. This is what I'm going to explain. In my mind, these are my views, of course. So one of them is treating others how you want to be treated, okay? Versus treating people how they treat you, okay? I'm sure a lot of people are with me when they've heard both of those quotes said. And those quotes are usually put out, like I said, in a positive light, okay? Let's think of the one. Treating people how you want to be treated is generally a positive thing, am I right? If I want that person over there to listen to me, if I want somebody, and we know that this has been a problem with me, we've talked about it. I've talked about it over and over to where that, I had to get to the root of why certain people who know me the best tune me out, to the point where I start thinking, is it something in my tone? Is it something in my voice? Is it that I talk fast? Therefore, it gives the impression that I'm trying to get in there before somebody cuts me off. Therefore, it provokes them to cut me off. I don't know. But that happens in cycles. I'll go for a while, especially at work. I will say that. Especially at work, I'll go for a while, and it's like people are cognizant of it, and they'll pay attention. Because what I've got to say is just as important, especially if it's work-related, as anybody else. Even if I'm incorrect in what I'm saying, the fact that I'm trying to say it is just as important. Now, it seems to go in cycles to where I will go through a time where the same thing goes over and over, where people, it's like I'm not even talking. Now, that is a deep-seated issue with me. And I've been working on trying to figure out why that happens. Okay. Now, I started thinking about that. Yeah, that is the scenario. Actually, that's the scenario, and it got me very angry. Honestly, it got me very angry, going, are you kidding me with this? That my words, like, not only am I, somebody will just talk over me, but I'll have somebody will just look completely the other direction as if I wasn't even talking. And conversations, about work, I try to put my 2 cents in, which I have a lot of knowledge as well, and I tend to not be listened to. That is a problem enough to where I will bring it up because it's a professional problem as well. Now, that is my ordeal to deal with, and I will. However, thinking about it got me into this whole frame of mind, which is a blessing. It's a lesson. It's a radio show. It's an airing, okay? So take that scenario, and then I'm going to give some other scenarios as we go. Take that particular scenario, and let's plug in both of those quotes, those motivational, inspirational quotes. Okay. Now, I have people who, when I'm talking about something, even if I'm giving input on work-related scenarios, in this case, we're just going to use this as an example, because I have this happen outside of work as well. It just happens more at work. It seems to happen more around people I'm around more often, and that always concerns me because I think, wow, the people I know the most are willing to tune me out the easiest. Now that goes deep. So that's a separate subject. So think about that scenario. If you're talking to someone and they just keep like pretending that you don't even have any input. Okay. You've got two different possibilities, or you've got many possibilities, but those two quotes I just told you. Do you treat others how you want to be treated? Now, do I start stopping when somebody's speaking, make eye contact, give feedback, showing them that I'm listening to what they're saying? Okay. Does that teach somebody to treat me that same way? Or do I treat people how they treat me? Now, like I said, that was also put out as a positive thing. Treat others, how they treat you. It was put more in a way of, and I was trying to find that particular saying or whatever, and it was basically saying how when you finally start treating other people, okay, so it wasn't really put out in a positive way. It was put out in a way to motivate people to stand up for themselves, basically, and it was kind of put out, I guess, in a little negative way. Like when you start treating people how they tend to treat you, they don't like it. Like people love treating you a certain way and they're used to it, and then suddenly you don't put up with that anymore and you start throwing it back at them. They suddenly don't like that. In most cases, I have to say, a lot of those cases, people don't realize, and that's part of my con list here for not doing that, because in a lot of cases when we do that and we change our own reactions, a lot of people will never relate it to, to that lesson. Okay. So, all right. Now, those are two different scenarios, like I said. We're going to plug in a few different scenarios. Okay, I'm going to go back to the not paying attention when someone's speaking thing. Okay, just because that was an initial thing. That's something that I actually sit here and think about, because that was my scenario. And when that was my scenario, what I started doing, what I used to do, is get very upset. I would try to force my opinion a little more or be a little louder, and then just get mad about it. And then get quiet and let it build up to the point where I'm going to explode. And then I'll turn and I'll say something when I can't hold it in any longer. And by then, because people just seem to do it without being aware that they're doing it, they have no idea why I'm so mad. Is that progressive or productive? No. Now, has that been productive as far as when I do kind of let it out, made them aware of the problem to the point where they will realize it and recognize it in the future? Actually, yes, it's happened, but I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person that blindsides somebody who's not aware that they're doing something and goes off in an aggressive manner. Okay, now that's what I used to do. And my aggressive manner would also be just not even speaking, but doing it with, an attitude. Now, that in one respect can be positive, okay? When I say something like, stepping back, if somebody's not listening, and I look at that as more of a gentle approach now, instead of the aggression, the aggressive post, or the aggressive stance, which I look at as a defensive mechanism. Okay, so we go offense, we go defense. Somebody just refuses to listen to me, whatever. So I started with this thing. If I'm not going to be listened to, then I've got nothing to say. Now, there's a double-edged sword with that as well. It's like, okay, am I going to sit here and be a good little girl when I do have things to say? Well, if I have something important enough to say, I will calmly address it in a manner that will be listened to. A calm manner that will be listened to. A very direct approach, whatever. Okay. There are so many different sides of different situations. I kind of wish I was explaining it a little better, because when I really started thinking about it, and I started thinking about the different approaches to different situations, there are so many different ones. So these are all just, I guess opening people's eyes. If they have certain scenarios happen and your response is not successful, maybe these are ways to look at it and understand how people are responding to you. And maybe these are ways to flip the switch, come at it from a different angle. Okay. So treat others as I would want to be treated would be to pay attention, to stop and don't jump in, to set an example, to talk slower, set an example. If somebody's speaking, stop the inclination to jump in and get my 2 cents in. Wait till everything's calm and quiet, and then very directly speak in a way that I won't be stepped over, because then it'll be obvious. Okay? So that takes a lot of concentration to do something like that. But at the same time, when somebody's speaking, if I make eye contact, I don't look down at my phone. If I respond to them, if I talk slowly in response to what they're saying, I give them all the time in the world to finish their thoughts. That over time could possibly train other people on how to respond to me. That's kind of a side note, and that's kind of funny, is that our energy and even speed in which we talk, I notice when people do this with me, when they talk very slowly, because I'm a fast talker, and I've realized over time it's because I'm trying to get my 2 cents in before I'm cut off, that it gives me anxiety. I'm sitting here going, okay, quick, get through it. I need to jump in. I need to say something. I'm waiting for my in. Well, that also goes back to the when somebody's speaking, are we listening to respond? Basically, we're not really paying attention to what they're saying. We're just waiting for our response. Or are we actually just stopping the brain process of moving forward and paying attention to what they're saying? So those are all lessons for me as well. And so like I said, you can train somebody in different scenarios, treating others how you want to be treated. You can start treating them that way, and maybe not accepting if somebody treats you a certain way. Cut them off. Not cut them off in conversation, but cut them off in, okay, like this example. If somebody wants to constantly talk, and they cut you off, whatever, then don't engage in conversation with them. Kind of, pull yourself back. I've done that before as well. Just, said, and I've done this in a positive way, which was really fantastic, which was a real step up for me, is said, well, if somebody doesn't want to listen to what I have to say, then I really don't have anything to say. If it's a waste of my breath to try to put my 2 cents in there, why waste my breath? That's wasting my energy. It's a waste of time for me, and I'm not going to waste my own time anymore. Okay, so that's a side effect of that. Now, the other one is versus treating people how they treat you. Now, you could also look at it like a way of opening people's eyes to what they're doing. Okay, if I continue to just jump in, if somebody started, and I've done this before too, I've caught myself doing this, and this I don't really want to do because it doesn't give me the response I want. Now, this is a reaction I caught myself doing in the past subconsciously. I didn't sit here thinking, well, they're not going to listen to me, I'm not going to listen to them. But there are different times when someone has just been that way toward me, to where in my mind, I never felt like it was a two-way conversation, to where I've started phasing them out because I've gotten really good at tunneling and blocking people, and that's over a long period of time with different scenarios. A lot of them were work scenarios where I just, to save my own sanity, learned to tune people out. Now, where that's not a good habit is when people are trying to talk to you. Okay, sometimes if my brain is somewhere else, I may tune them out if I don't feel like we have a two-way conversation, and I'm trying to make myself more cognizant of that. Okay, because when I do that, if I learn not to tune other people out and give them my full attention, then I'm assuming that's going to train them to do the same for me. But I have inevitably or unconsciously done that before, where I realized that they talk so much without it really being a two-way conversation, that I would tend to phase them out. And it wasn't in retaliation. In one way, it wasn't retaliation for how they were with me, but it was an automatic response. So that made me realize that if somebody's just going to constantly talk, that pretty much everyone, if it's a one-way conversation, that's, most people's response is to kind of tune it out. They're no longer engaged. So those are things to keep in mind. But that's just this one scenario. When I'm giving these two, treating others how you want to be treated versus treating people how they treat you. Now, I'm going to give another scenario so that it's not just about that particular subject. The other scenario, one of many scenarios, would be relationships. Okay, so if somebody is in a relationship and let's say, I don't know, they cheated on you, or let's say, you're in a relationship or you're toying with a relationship or whatever, where, you're both kind of paying attention to each other. And this has happened before. So, okay, now I can think about it. This is actually a scenario I've had happen multiple times. They start to tune you out. They start to blow you off. Ghosting. Let me tell you, I'm sorry, but the whole new generation thing, now that we're so in texting and all that, the term is ghosting. I was taught that term over the last few months, and now I pay attention to it. Ghosting to me, and that, if you don't know what ghosting is, in the new wave of technology, it is you just stop acknowledging somebody. Now, to me, that means you stop responding to their text messages, their phone calls, their Facebook. You can pay a lot of attention to them. All of a sudden, they phase you out. They're setting an example, and that's what it is setting an example. Now, I personally think that that's a weak move. And that's what's got me so frustrated with dating anymore, because I look at it that way. I look at it like I want old school back. I want it as fine, so a guy stops calling me. At least I'm not, you call maybe once or twice and they don't respond. It's like, okay, I'm out. They gave me the message. To me, it would have been a bolder, nicer, kinder, more gentlemanly move to actually tell me that they don't have an interest or whatever. But now with technology, ghosting is actually an acceptable form of blowing somebody off. And whether it's friendship, whether it's relationship, whether it's verge of relationship, whether it is networking or even association, as far as like business-wise, to just eliminate somebody from your life or to try to send a message, because I've also seen this where people will try to send a message to make you feel bad, make you feel ignored. I've had guys do that to me. I've had friends do that to me. They want to make me feel ignored. So you notice that. That's the bad thing. And the good thing about the electronic era is that it's so easy to fall into habit. You're used to a certain amount of attention. You're used to paying attention to each other, to responding to each other or whatever. You do notice pretty much immediately when suddenly you get ghosted. I'm sorry, that's weakness. And it turns me completely off from friendships, from men. It turns me off to be ghosted, because I think that is a form of manipulation in one respect, and a form of weakness in another. Okay, so let's use that as an example. Now, I also found myself doing this, and I don't really want to do this, but there was another meme that I wanted to pull up, and it had shown something like, you get the version of me that you create. Something like that. Like, I'm a well-rounded person, and who I am to you depends on who you are to me. And that's truth. I realize that I kind of mirror people, and some of us do. So, if you're doing, when it comes to media, texting, social media, whatever, I kind of follow suit, because I'm not going to be that person. And I think a lot of people will do that because none of us want to look like we're chasing somebody's attention. And like I said, this is in friendship, this is in networking, this is in associations, business-wise, and romance. Okay, so when it comes to social media or texting, whatever, if you stop getting that reaction from that other person, I think a lot of us tend to follow suit. And I've done that before with the mindset of, well, I'm not going to chase after. Obviously, I'm being blown off. So I change my attitude toward that person because they've affected me in a way that it's changed my attitude toward them. And also where I have done the same thing, where it's like, well, let's show them how it feels with that in mind. That whole thing about treating people how they treat you. In the back of our minds, I think a lot of people think that way, that if I treat them the same way they treat me, then they're going to realize how it feels and they're going to regret it and, feel bad. They're going to be apologetic that they treated you a certain way. Well, I've come to realize it doesn't work, because when we change who we are and we become how other people are, this is a huge one here. First of all, that's something I get upset at myself when I allow that to happen. When I start responding to somebody in the way they respond to me, when I feel like I'm lowering myself, not taking the high road. The high road is being yourself no matter what. because you're responsible for how you present yourself. Other people are responsible how they present themselves. The idea of trying to make somebody understand how it makes you feel by doing it to them, a lot of people who might be more selfish might not always take the high road. They're never going to see it that way, and that's something I've realized over time. They're not going to see it that way. They're suddenly going to see the change in your behavior, and a lot of people, I think a very small percentage of people, are really enlightened enough or care enough in all actuality. That sounds like a negative statement, but I've come to realize that. A lot of people are so tuned in with themselves, a lot of self-absorbed, which doesn't make them bad people. It's just that society as it is, we have to pay attention to what's going on our own plate here. So what ends up happening is that people end up too self-absorbed to notice that you are actually treating them in response to how you're being treated, and they look at you like you've changed your attitude toward them. You're now in offensive mode. That's why I was talking about offense and defense. I look at things like that. Like if I'm taking the high road, and then suddenly somebody does something toward me and I react in a negative way, and I just, let myself fall and say, no, I'm going to throw it right back at him or whatever, then I'm playing offense, okay? Or I'm being defensive. That's it. I look at it as I'm being defensive. My guard's going up, therefore I'm going to ice you out or do whatever. Versus, now you can look at it both ways, as offense being offensive, defense just guarding yourself, or defense is you're being defensive against something somebody's doing toward you, and offense, how I'm looking at it in this case, is if I rise above, I'm playing offensively. I'm taking charge and I'm setting that standard, and I'm going to lead by being myself, okay? So anyway, I was actually meaning to go in a different direction with that, but I'm going to just go with it. Okay, so I look at things as a passive response or an aggressive or an active or a passive response. The active response slant aggressive, okay? And that's us being defensive, okay? If somebody does something towards you and it starts bothering you, i.e. me, whoever, and you become defensive. Therefore, you respond in an active way. You do something in response, even if doing something is throwing it back at them exactly how they're throwing it at you, or coming at them aggressively or whatever. That's an aggressive mood. Versus a passive response, understanding that when people act a certain way, it's who they are. It's not who you are, which is the most important part of this whole show tonight. And that doesn't make them bad people. Going back to my scenario, it doesn't make them bad people. It makes them the culprits. It doesn't make me responsible if other people tune me out, if other people don't give me the same respect I give them. Doesn't make them bad people. It just means that there's a lack of respect for whatever reason. Okay? So to take a passive approach, instead of coming back at them, instead of getting angry, instead of being defensive toward them, I'm going to look at it as taking the offense, setting the stage, rising above. Okay, therefore I'm acting, but I'm not acting defensively. Okay, I know those terms can be kind of intermittent there, but so anyway, I have on here on my notes, I wanted to give different examples of the scenarios and then give an active and a passive response, which I think I did. I think I'm looking at just with, let's just say the scenario of ghosting and people and how they play those little games or just let you down in that way. Let's use that as the example. The active and the passive responses. An active response, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at the active response as treating people how they treat you. Turn around and do the same thing to them. Now, there are different scenarios, and I said this at the very beginning, where so many different scenarios depend on your exact scenario, okay? That could be the passive approach for some people, because depending on who you're dealing with or what the scenario is, maybe actually doing something like that, if somebody doesn't respond to your text message, maybe doing the same thing to them will actually help. Maybe that is the passive. Maybe the active, aggressive approach would be to come at them and go off on them about not responding. Maybe the passive approach would be the short answers, would be, okay, well, I'm going to start answering the way they answer me. Just little short snippets that make me feel like they really don't want to communicate. Maybe that will spur the other person to say, well, I don't like that. Or why are they suddenly not paying attention or whatever? Okay. So like I said, your approach, whichever one of these you decide to do, treating others how you want to be treated or treating others how they treat you, it's really, they can both be positive and both be negative. So I guess, starting it off, putting one in a positive light, one in a negative light was probably wrong. So that's just the example of giving it a passive and an active response. The texting, say your passive response would be to just respond like you normally would. That's you being you, them being them. Maybe over time, if you really feel like they're playing games with you or trying to send a message, then respond, but don't respond how you normally would. Maybe just be polite, but don't be overly engaging. And that may trigger something as well. The active response might be texting them saying, I haven't even heard from you and blah, blah, blah. And in some cases, that might actually help. Okay. So now, how to give a passive response without offending and how to give an active response without being defensive. That's exactly what I was just trying to do there. Now, the next part of it that I'm running out of time actually. The next part in my little timeline, because I have these listed in kind of the scenarios and how to assess these scenarios, would be based on the response of the other person, assess the lesson. Say you give an active or a passive response to somebody. Now, how do they respond back to you? Okay, if I give, in my scenario of not speaking, if I turn around and I just very politely just stop engaging in conversation, stop giving my 2 cents, whatever, let's say that they just continue not paying attention. The lesson that I will look into that, I'll say, okay, I think I handled it the way I needed to handle it. The reaction they're giving me tells me what lesson. In some cases, that lesson is that they don't have a respect for you. Okay? In some cases, they may not be aware that you have something to say, and I may have to stop and say, look, this is a problem, which this is what I'm planning on doing, by the way. So I think learning the lesson in the whole scenario, learning the lesson on our own reactions to situations, learning the lesson about how and why we would react actively and or passively to any of these scenarios, going back to we teach ourselves about ourselves. We learn about ourselves, which is the most important thing. Also, the lesson, learning about how other people engage with us. Understanding maybe why they're reacting a certain way, maybe understanding a little better what kind of effect we have on them, understanding the relationship between the two people or the organization, you and the scenario, whatever it is. Understanding that is a big part of the lesson in all of it. And another part of the lesson would be how they respond back to you in any of these given situations. If they respond back in a negative way or a positive way, a lot of times the response back to our response to them will actually tell you more about the relationship. Okay, I used the example, and I don't know that that's the case. I'm using that as a completely made up example as far as with me, okay, not being heard. Maybe if I act passive and I just stop talking or stop trying to put my 2 cents in, seeing the reaction, seeing if over time somebody even notices or if they stop when I do have something to say, that kind of scenario. And I've done that my whole life. I've done that. And a lot of times when this scenario returned, all of a sudden we have perked ears when I go to say something. It's like they realize that maybe I have something to say. Maybe they realize that I wasn't engaging. Maybe they think, okay, what does Mel have to say about this? Or the opposite. They just continue life without hearing me, don't even notice that I'm not speaking, whatever. Sometimes that's a little test, but that will tell me how people truly feel, okay? Or how they look at me and such. So that is, I think, probably the most important, one of the most important parts. Obviously, the whole thing is important, is assessing the lesson, all the different lessons in all these scenarios. Okay, so I actually had... I actually had some different scenarios, but I'm running out of time. Oh, I had so many scenarios, really. I learned a lot about this in the, believe it or not, the aggressive driver's course that I took. I took an aggressive driver's course when I got into my accident so that I can try to convince the judge not to take points off. And the course itself still opened my eyes because I learned from everything, and it worked. By the way, they didn't take any points off. Nothing on my record, which is good. So one of those things, she was talking about driving and how a lot of times we react to other aggressive drivers. But the most important thing for us to do is to reel ourselves in. If you have somebody being aggressive, not just aggressive, in all these situations, if somebody reacting or acting in a way towards us that causes us to want to have road rage, okay, in any scenario, let's call it road rage, that the most important thing to do is let that person do whatever they're doing. Move over. Like on the road, move over. Just let them do their thing. Because for us to engage, going back to an eye for an eye, for us to engage in that, a negative plus a negative in that case is going to lead to a deadly crash. Okay? Think about this as well. There are certain scenarios where reacting in just as strong way as somebody may be reacting to you, or throwing back something to them as they're throwing to you, not only may that change who you are, not taking the high road anymore, but it also may, a negative plus a negative, an eye for an eye. Okay? But it all depends on your scenario. Okay? My brain goes wild. You know this. I have the smallest scenario and I think along these lines, and I start really diving deep into all of it, and I love that. I wanted to talk about the narcissist because I've had scenarios with narcissists and how they try to manipulate, maneuver, and pull me into reacting a certain way, and how I've learned not to. I've learned not to give control to those narcissists. Fighting in relationships, both physical and verbal. Aggressive driver's course, which I just covered. People, quote, baiting you, and I have scenarios with that as well, and how when I changed my reaction to those scenarios, I gained control in my life. And they changed the way they react to me as well. Cheating on somebody, someone stops listening to a conversation and such. So those were my examples I don't have time to get to. Maybe we'll do another show because I really do like the concept of this. So anyway, there's two more. Let me see. There's one more quote I wanted to finish it up. Keep this quote in mind too. Don't treat people as bad as they are. Treat them as good as you are. I like that. I don't necessarily think that means people are bad. But if somebody's treating you in a way, or acting in a way that would trigger us to want to be defensive and such and go at them, I like that quote because, like I said, that says more. We're all responsible for our own selves. Our actions and reactions are on us. That's the most important part of it, is getting to know ourselves and be able to control those reactions, because how we act, how we react says more about us. So when we treat people not how they are, not how they're treating us, but we treat them how we are, that says a lot. That's character right there. I'm in that phase of life where I'm really trying to build on that. I'm trying not to be so reactive. I'm trying to really think things through. And even if in that my initial reaction would be expressing an emotion that I don't like, I learn from it and I try to correct it. And that's important. Okay? So anyway, I hope you got a lot out of tonight's show. Yeah, I think I said there's a lot of different areas I could have gone with it, but I appreciate you listening. So now stay tuned for Tiffany Lewis coming up next on Be the Change, and I will talk to you next Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ClearSourceRadio.com. Have a great week. Good night, everybody.